Get rid of that cleaning woman right now. She cannot be anywhere near this meeting. The words hissed through the small microphone clipped to David Miller's lapel. David, the general manager of the prestigious Imperial Crest Hotel, tightened his jaw as he spoke, his eyes locked on the group of important guests entering the grand lobby. The marble floor gleamed under the glittering chandelier, and every polished shoe seemed to reflect the light like a stage set for perfection. Walking toward him with quiet authority was Charles Liang, a real estate mogul who controlled luxury properties across Asia. 6 associates walked in step with him, dressed alike in dark suits and carrying leather portfolios. David put on his most rehearsed smile, perfected over 2 decades in hospitality, and stepped forward to welcome them. "Mr. Liang, welcome to the Imperial Crest," he said smoothly. But Charles did not reply in English. Instead, he spoke quickly and precisely in Mandarin, the tone crisp and demanding. David's smile froze. He scrambled to unlock a translation app on his phone, thrusting it between them. The synthetic voice that came out mangled the words so badly that Charles's expression darkened with annoyance. "I'm sorry, Mr. Liang," David stammered nervously. "None of our staff speaks Chinese." The sentence landed like a hammer. The lobby grew silent. A few of Charles's associates exchanged telling looks, doubt flickering in their eyes. Just a few steps away, pushing a cleaning cart quietly along the wall, was a woman in a gray uniform named Sophia Johnson. For the guests, she was just another cleaner, someone invisible, there to vanish into the background. What they didn't know was that in her tiny apartment a few blocks away, her walls were lined with framed degrees, a bachelor's from Yale and a master's from Beijing University in East Asian Studies. No one at the hotel imagined that within hours, this invisible woman would decide the future of a multi-million-dollar partnership. 3 hours earlier in the staff lounge, the tension was thick. David Miller stood at the center, tapping his polished shoes against the tiled floor, commanding everyone's attention. "At exactly 2 p.m. Mr. Charles Liang arrives," he announced firmly. "He manages a portfolio of more than 30 properties across Asia. If he notices us, the Imperial Crest has a shot at joining a global network." His voice sharpened. "So do not fail me." Heads nodded around the room. The head chef proudly described an Asian-inspired menu created for the occasion. The engineering team confirmed that the presidential suite had been set to Liang's favorite temperature, 72 degrees sharp. The concierge read out a list of exclusive clubs the guests would be given access to. Then one manager raised a careful concern. "Sir, Mr. Liang prefers to conduct meetings in Mandarin. Should we hire an interpreter?" David waved the idea away with irritation. "His assistant speaks perfect English. Besides, our AI translator is practically flawless. We don't need extra costs." That single decision planted the seed of disaster. Meanwhile, in the East Wing, Sophia was quietly changing bed sheets with meticulous care. She smoothed Egyptian cotton corners as neatly as a surgeon's hands, placed a diffuser with white tea and jasmine exactly as specified, and whispered softly in fluent Mandarin to herself, "Keep this diffuser away from sunlight for consistent fragrance." In her work bag rested a well-worn Chinese economics magazine, a dog-eared dictionary, and her phone buzzing with yet another reminder, her overdue student loan payment. 300 job rejections. 60 unanswered interviews. And now, with degrees that should have secured her an international career, she spent her days pushing a cleaning cart, waiting for someone to see her worth. 2 p.m. sharp. A fleet of black SUVs pulled into the hotel's circular driveway. The scene unfolded like clockwork, security opening doors, managers lining up with forced smiles, and staff appearing at every corner to take bags and press elevator buttons. Charles Liang stepped out first, his charcoal gray suit sharp, his red tie commanding. His team followed behind, portfolios in hand. David extended his hand warmly. "Mr. Liang, welcome." Charles shook it briefly, then turned to his associates, speaking rapidly in Mandarin. The sound filled the air like music David couldn't understand. His smile tightened. Luckily, Amy Lin, a young associate of Charles, translated into English, "Mr. Liang appreciates the architecture." David exhaled in relief. He gestured to the Chinese-inspired menu, to the adjusted climate control, to the perfectly arranged suites. As the group toured the spa, the ballroom, and the restaurant, Charles continued speaking mainly in Mandarin. Amy translated bits, but the nuances slipped away. Trailing at the edge of the group, Sophia pushed her cart, listening closely. She heard Charles whisper to one of his associates, "Everything looks polished, but they don't seem to truly understand our needs." A chill ran down her spine. The tour ended in the executive boardroom. David eagerly opened his binder filled with projections, charts, and expansion plans. But Charles shifted the discussion. Instead of listening, he asked a sharp question, in Mandarin, about new foreign investment regulations and how they would affect integrated hotel retail projects. David's face stiffened. He fumbled for his phone again. The app spat out nonsense, chicken tax moon hotel. One of Charles's associates tried not to laugh. David flushed with embarrassment. Amy Lin translated gently, "Mr. Liang doubts your level of preparation." David's voice cracked as he announced a 5-minute break. The hallway outside erupted into chaos. David barked at his finance lead, "Cover foreign investment tax." But she shook her head, she only handled domestic matters. He demanded an interpreter, but the earliest one was 30 minutes away. The IT manager admitted the app didn't support legal or business terms. Sales pushed flashy visuals, food and beverage brought sample dishes. Every fix collided with the wall of time. Through the glass, David saw Charles glance at his watch and close his portfolio. His associates pulled out their phones, already considering alternatives. The deal was slipping away. And in that moment, standing silently against the wall, Sophia realized the truth. She had lived 5 years in Beijing, studied Chinese law and business culture, and knew exactly what Charles was testing. But her role, housekeeper, kept her invisible. She remembered the time she had been scolded for sounding too educated when speaking to guests. Survival had meant silence. But today, silence would cost the hotel everything. Sophia pulled off her gloves, tucked them into her apron, smoothed a strand of hair, and stepped toward the boardroom. David saw her and waved her away in panic. "Not now." Ignoring him, Sophia looked directly at Charles and spoke in perfect, respectful Mandarin. "Mr. Liang, I heard your question about the new foreign investment regulations. If you'd like, I can help explain and translate." The entire room froze. Charles raised his eyebrows in genuine surprise and slowly, a smile touched his face. For the first time that afternoon he was ready to listen. The boardroom held its breath. For a moment no one moved. Charles Liang leaned back slightly, studying Sophia with sharp curiosity. His associates exchanged quick glances, clearly intrigued. They hadn't expected a cleaner in a gray uniform to speak flawless Mandarin, much less in the formal, professional tone used in academic and business circles. "Please," Charles said in Mandarin, his voice calm but probing. "Explain to me how these investment reforms affect hotel projects that include retail." Sophia's heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "The new regulations," she explained smoothly, "allow certain zoning advantages for integrated hotel and retail developments, provided cultural exchange elements are built into the business model. That means approvals are faster if your project can demonstrate genuine cultural value." Her words flowed confidently, not like someone repeating from a textbook but like someone who had lived inside the language. She cited examples from Beijing and Shanghai, compared the incentives, and pointed out how the Imperial Crest location near the financial district positioned it for strategic benefits. Charles's eyes narrowed, testing her further. He added regional slang, dropped in legal jargon, and mentioned unique zoning challenges. Without hesitation, Sophia matched him word for word, translating complex policies into clear, business-ready language. At the far end of the table, David Miller's face drained of color. This was his boardroom, his deal, and yet a cleaning lady was controlling the conversation. He tried to interrupt, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you, Sophia. We'll handle it from here. She can just translate while I return to the presentation." But the atmosphere had shifted. Charles barely looked at David. His focus was on Sophia. The questions came one after another, and she answered each with calm precision. Amy Lin, Charles's young associate, leaned back and folded her notebook. She gave Sophia a small nod of approval as if to say, "You're doing exactly what's needed." David clenched the edge of the table, torn between pride and humiliation. For 20 years he had preached no detail is too small, yet here he was blindsided by the one detail he had ignored, the people he considered invisible. The tension broke when Charles asked a simple but pointed question. What is your official role here? David rushed to answer before Sophia could speak. She's part of our housekeeping staff, he said flatly. Silence hung in the air. Charles's associates stopped writing, stunned. Charles turned back to Sophia, switching to Mandarin. With your qualifications, your cleaning rooms? Sophia held his gaze. It's honest work while I search for a role that matches my degree, she said calmly. Charles shook his head slightly, unimpressed with David's dismissal. Switching back to English through Amy, he said, in my organization we have systems to identify talent. Overlooking someone like her is a serious disadvantage. His words were sharp, not shouted, but carried enough weight to cut through the entire room. David's cheeks flushed. For the first time in years he felt exposed. His obsession with chandeliers, banners, and surface perfection had blinded him to the talent standing right under his nose. Sophia, sensing the opportunity, didn't gloat. She simply pulled a blank sheet of paper from David's binder and said gently, if I may, I'd like to outline a short roadmap we could start today. No slides, just practical steps. Charles gestured with his hand. Go ahead. Sophia drew 3 headings on the paper. Step 1, guest experience. We must replace surface-level gestures with meaningful ones. Instead of generic background music in the lobby, introduce a tea ritual. Tea is not just a drink, it's a language of respect. A 2-minute cup of tea poured properly can create lasting trust. She sketched quickly. Step 2, family accommodation. Many of your guests travel across generations. They need continuity. That means connected rooms, furniture that supports both children and the elderly, and technology that works seamlessly across devices. These details show we understand their lives, not just their wallets. Her pen moved steadily. Step 3, regulatory compliance. The city just updated zoning ceilings. By filing correctly, we can unlock tax incentives tied to cultural exchange. But those incentives require proof, not marketing. Real partnerships, cultural programs, and staff exchange initiatives must be in place. This isn't decoration, it's documentation. The room was silent except for the scratch of her pen. Charles leaned forward, clearly impressed. And how would you measure success? Sophia paused only a second. With numbers? If, after 2 months, WeChat and Alipay transactions do not increase, if guest satisfaction scores from Mandarin-speaking guests do not improve, if revenue from cultural services like tea remains flat, then we adjust the plan. No promises without accountability. For the first time, Charles smiled openly. His associates pulled out pens and began writing quickly. The mood had shifted entirely. David, realizing the tide had turned, placed the clicker for his slides back on the table. He no longer had control. Sophia had become the anchor in the room. At the close of the meeting, Charles handed Sophia his black business card, both hands extended in respect. This is my direct contact, he said. If you're interested, I'll personally review your background. Sophia bowed her head slightly, accepting the card with both hands, honoring the gesture. As the investors left the room, Charles added one final remark to David. Your greatest asset is already here. You simply haven't been looking. The words landed harder than any rejection. David had been humiliated, but he also understood. For the first time in his career, he realized luxury wasn't in chandeliers or polished floors. It was in the people who knew how to speak the right language at the right moment. And that day, a woman in a gray uniform had spoken louder than any crystal light could shine. When the boardroom doors closed and the last of Charles Liang's associates disappeared down the hallway, silence filled the space. David Miller remained seated at the head of the table, his fingers gripping the edges as though he could anchor himself to authority he no longer had. The weight of Charles's final words, "Your greatest asset is already here," echoed in his mind like a hammer. Sophia stood quietly near the side wall, the black business card still warm in her hand. She felt every pair of eyes on her. Some filled with shock, some with respect, and some with resentment. She knew she had broken an unspoken rule. People in uniforms like hers were supposed to stay silent, invisible, and obedient. Yet in just a few minutes she had saved a partnership that David's entire leadership team was about to lose. David finally spoke, his voice uneven. "We'll regroup later." He cleared his throat. "Everyone, thank you for your efforts." His managers filed out quickly, whispering among themselves. None dared to look Sophia in the eye, though a few stole glances of reluctant admiration. When the room was nearly empty, David gestured for Sophia to stay. "You risked everything walking in here," he said, his tone tight. Sophia held her ground. "Sir, with respect, doing nothing would have risked even more." David opened his mouth, then shut it again. He knew she was right. He also knew he had underestimated her, and not just her. He had underestimated what lay hidden in the very staff he had worked so hard to keep unseen. That evening the lobby looked different. The air still smelled faintly of flowers, the chandeliers still scattered light across the marble, but there was a new tension buzzing under the surface. The staff whispered about what had happened. Some said Sophia embarrassed the hotel. Others said she had rescued them all. Sophia returned to her cleaning duties as if nothing had happened, pushing her cart through the corridors, wiping surfaces with practiced motions. But inside she felt a shift. For 4 years she had carried her degrees and her knowledge in silence. For 4 years she had swallowed humiliation. But today she had finally spoken and people had listened. Back in his office, David stared at the city skyline through the wide glass windows. For 2 decades he had built his reputation on details: polished brass, perfect lighting, menus tailored to VIP tastes. He believed those things made luxury. But Charles Liang had cut him down in one sentence. The greatest detail of all, the people he had ignored. He replayed the meeting in his mind. The translation app failing. His managers scrambling. His own panic rising. And then Sophia, calm, knowledgeable, precise, turning the meeting around. He had nearly lost everything in front of his peers and a powerful client, and a woman he had once dismissed as invisible had saved him. The shame stung deeper than the humiliation. The next morning, David walked into the staff lounge earlier than usual. Conversations stopped as soon as he entered. He looked around at the cleaners, the cooks, the bellhops, the maintenance crew. Most avoided his gaze, pretending to busy themselves with uniforms or breakfast trays. He cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said stiffly. A few mumbled responses. His eyes found Sophia sitting quietly in the corner, sipping tea from a paper cup. She looked up at him, her face calm, almost unreadable. "Miss Johnson," he said firmly. "My office. 5 o'clock." The room buzzed again as he walked out. Some whispered that she was going to be fired. Others whispered that she might be promoted. Sophia said nothing. She simply went back to her tea, her expression steady. Later that day in the executive suite hallway, Emma Brooks, the housekeeping supervisor, caught up with Sophia. "What you did yesterday," Emma whispered, glancing around nervously, "was risky. If it had gone wrong, you'd be out of a job." Sophia met her eyes. "If it had gone wrong, the hotel would have lost the deal." Emma hesitated. "I don't know how you do it. You know more about this business than half the managers, but you're still wearing that uniform." Sophia gave a small smile. "Because no one wanted to see past it." Emma looked at her cart, then back at her. "Maybe now they will." At 5 o'clock sharp, Sophia walked into David's office. The blinds were half closed, the desk tidy, the city outside glowing with late afternoon light. David stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Sit," he said. She did. For a long moment he didn't turn around. "I've been in this industry 20 years, he said slowly. "I thought I knew what mattered. But yesterday in front of Charles Liang, I realized I've been blind." Sophia stayed silent, waiting. David finally faced her. His expression was hard, but his voice carried something new, something close to humility. "I can't undo the mistakes I've made. But I want to fix them. Starting with you." He sat at his desk, leaned forward, and folded his hands. "I want you to take the lead on what you suggested yesterday. The cultural roadmap. The tea service. The guest experience design. The regulatory filings. You'll have authority to coordinate across departments. You'll report directly to me." Sophia blinked, surprised, though she kept her composure. "That's a director's role," she said carefully. "Yes, David admitted. Director of International Guest Relations. If you'll accept it. Her heart raced. After years of invisibility, the offer was almost overwhelming. But she had learned to stay steady. If I accept, she said slowly, I need more than a title. I need the freedom to act. I'll need a small but flexible budget, direct access to staff across all departments, and the right to make operational changes without waiting for layers of approval. David studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. Done. The clock ticked between them. For the first time they looked at each other not as manager and cleaner, but as two people who had something to prove. Sophia extended her hand. Then I accept. David shook it, his grip firm. We start tonight. Within an hour he gathered a small circle in a side conference room. Sarah Coleman from Finance, Ethan Morales from IT, Lauren Nguyen from Food and Beverage, Ben Carter from Sales, and Emma Brooks from Housekeeping. Sophia stood at the front with a whiteboard and the same calm voice she had carried into the boardroom. This isn't about appearances anymore, she said. This is about building systems that speak our guests' language. I've divided it into 3 acts, each 30 days long. Act 1 starts now. She drew a line on the board. Step 1, tea service in the lobby. Not for show but for meaning. A trained tea master, proper cups, proper ritual. 2 minutes that create trust. She pointed to Ethan. Step 2, technology. WeChat and Alipay integration at reception, restaurant, and minibar. A static QR code posted at eye level. Backup plans if the system fails. Then to Emma. Step 3, family accommodations. Connecting rooms with furniture suited for 3 generations. Armchairs for elders, rugs for children, help buttons at reachable height. We don't sell square footage, we sell peace of mind. She paused. If these don't work, we'll change course. But we must try. The room was quiet. Then Ethan nodded. I can run a test tonight. Sarah added, I'll open a separate account code so these expenses can count toward the cultural exchange filing. Emma straightened her shoulders. I'll start with the evening shift. Even Ben, usually skeptical, leaned back and said, if this works, I can sell the story, not just the rooms. Sophia felt something shift. For the first time since she had joined the hotel, people weren't looking through her. They were looking at her. And she was ready. By the next evening, the Imperial Crest lobby was no longer just a polished passageway with flowers and chandeliers. A small round table had been placed beneath the crystal lights, its porcelain cups gleaming faintly. And standing beside it, ready to demonstrate the art of serving tea, was Lily Chen, a soft-spoken tea master Sophia had contacted through a personal connection. Lily taught the front desk staff how to warm the cups before pouring, how to bow lightly while presenting them, and how to leave small pauses of silence at just the right moment. Tea is not only flavor, she explained. It is respect in liquid form. Some employees fumbled at first. Cups rattled, bows looked awkward, smiles felt stiff. But Sophia reassured them, it's not about perfection. It's about sincerity. Guests will see the difference. While the ritual began to take root, Ethan from IT worked on the payment systems. 4 months, WeChat Pay and Alipay logos had sat in the lobby as empty decorations. Tonight, for the first time, the systems were live. Ethan taped a static QR code at eye level near reception and tested transactions with Sophia's phone. The first attempt failed. The second succeeded. The soft electronic ting of approval echoed like music. Now, Ethan said, half smiling, we just have to make sure it never fails again. Meanwhile, Emma and her housekeeping team prepared the connecting suites. 2 rooms now flowed into each other seamlessly. A low armchair had been placed where an elder could rise easily, a thick rug for children to tumble on without harm, and a help button mounted at a reachable height. Emma stood back, studying the space with new eyes. We don't just clean anymore, she murmured. We care. The first test came faster than anyone expected. A Chinese businessman checked in late that night. At the reception desk, when he pulled out his phone to pay through WeChat, the transaction declined. The young receptionist froze in panic. Sophia, who had been watching quietly from the side, stepped forward. May I? She asked the guest politely in Mandarin. She borrowed his phone, checked the network, and signaled Ethan, who switched the system to the backup script. A static QR code appeared instantly. Sophia confirmed the payment manually, promising to send a receipt by email. The guest smiled with relief, removed his cap, and thanked her warmly in Chinese. The soft ting of approval rang again, louder in their minds than any applause. Ethan leaned towards Sophia afterward. "It worked because you had a backup. That's the difference." She nodded. "Systems fail. Respect shouldn't." By the third day, word of the tea ritual had spread. Guests stopped in the lobby not just to pass through but to linger, curious about the tea table. Lily poured carefully, telling short stories about oolong leaves and Chinese traditions. Business travelers who normally rushed through began pausing for 2 quiet minutes, leaving with smiles instead of stress. Marketers often spent thousands chasing guest loyalty. Yet here it was, gained by a teacup. Ben Carter from sales approached Sophia on the 4th day. "I'll admit," he said with a grin, "I thought this was all fluff. But last night I closed a deal with a client from Shenzhen. He didn't care about our suites or our restaurants. He cared that we respected his culture. I didn't sell him the room. I sold him the story." Sophia allowed herself a small smile. That's exactly the point. But the most important shift wasn't in the guests. It was in the staff. For years, housekeeping had been trained to stay invisible, slip in, clean, disappear. But Sophia changed that narrative. At the next team meeting, Emma stood in front of her staff and said firmly, "We are no longer just housekeeping. From today we are rooms and care. We don't only clean. We create peace of mind." The words felt strange at first. Some staff laughed nervously, others looked skeptical. But slowly the meaning sank in. They weren't invisible anymore. They were part of the story the hotel was learning to tell. Daniel Ortiz, a young night shift maintenance worker studying engineering on the side, raised his hand. "If guests struggle with lighting in the lobby, I could redesign the lamp angles. It would make their photos look better." For the first time, Emma didn't dismiss the suggestion. "Do it," she said. And just like that, another invisible voice became part of the change. Behind the scenes, Sophia worked late into the night with Sarah Coleman from finance. Together, they drafted the first outlines of the cultural exchange filing needed for tax incentives. They gathered receipts for Lily Chen's contract, prepared documentation for East Asian art exhibitions with a local museum, and created proposals for small staff exchange programs with a hospitality school abroad. "These aren't just numbers," Sophia explained. "They're proof. Proof that what we do isn't decoration. It's sustainable, it's real, and it deserves recognition." Sarah looked at her, surprised. "You talk about taxes like they're a story." Sophia smiled faintly. "Everything is a story. You just have to know how to tell it." On the 7th day, David Miller made an unannounced round of inspections. He walked through the lobby and stopped at the tea table. 2 businessmen in suits were sipping quietly while Lily explained the history of oolong. David noticed their expressions, relaxed, respectful. He moved on to reception and saw guests using the QR codes without asking for assistance. For years he had obsessed over chandeliers, angles, and perfect banners. Yet what made him breathe easier now wasn't the surface. It was the feeling of inner order returning. Later that evening, as he stood by his office window, he admitted to himself what he had refused for so long. Luxury wasn't in marble floors or glittering lights. Luxury was in the language of respect. And it had taken someone he once dismissed as just a cleaner to show him the truth. By the end of the first week, Sophia's plan had only just begun. But already the Imperial Crest Hotel was no longer the same place. The chandeliers still shone. The floors still sparkled. But now, when guests entered, they smelled tea instead of perfume, they paid with ease instead of struggle, and they felt cared for instead of managed. And for the first time in her 4 long years of pushing a cart, Sophia Johnson wasn't invisible anymore. She was the voice that had turned the tide. By the end of the first month, the changes inside the Imperial Crest were no longer experiments. They were becoming habits. Guests stopped in the lobby expecting the tea ritual. Reception staff handled WeChat and Alipay transactions with confidence. Housekeepers no longer slipped around like shadows. They walked with heads held higher, greeting guests warmly when appropriate. The invisible was slowly becoming visible. But Sophia knew this was only Act 1. She had promised David, and more importantly herself, that the plan would move in 3 acts, each 30 days long. Now Act 2 had to begin. The first item on her list was privacy. Sophia called a meeting with security and front desk staff. Privacy isn't a slogan, she said firmly. It's a structure. It's the flow of people through a building. Business travelers need discretion. Families need comfort. Elderly guests need dignity. We must design pathways that give them all that without them having to ask. Daniel Ortiz had already been reviewing security camera footage, studying where bottlenecks formed during peak hours. He showed Sophia a video clip where 2 streams of guests collided awkwardly near the elevator lobby. If we reroute housekeeping carts during this hour and adjust rope barriers, the flow will separate naturally, he explained. Sophia nodded, impressed. That's exactly the kind of solution we need. Meanwhile, Sarah Coleman from finance had begun pulling expense reports that could qualify for the cultural exchange tax incentive. She met with Sophia in the small office near the operations floor, papers spread across the desk. Tea-master contracts, documented. Art exhibition agreements, pending signatures. Staff exchange program, still in draft, Sarah reported. Sophia leaned over the paperwork, her brow furrowed. We can't submit fluff. We need hard proof, receipts, contracts, signatures. If it looks like decoration, the auditors will throw it out. Sarah adjusted her glasses. I've never seen someone treat tax filings like a story, but you're right. Every number here has to prove that this isn't marketing, it's lived practice. At the same time, Lauren Nguyen from Food and Beverage was reworking the menu. She gathered her team in the kitchen, holding a plate in one hand. This garnish, she said, pointing to a plastic-looking flower, is fake Asian flair. It's insulting and inauthentic. We remove it. We serve real dishes that taste genuine. That's how we show respect. Some chefs grumbled at first. It was easier to stick with decorations that looked fancy. But Lauren insisted. And when Jasmine Hall, a quiet line cook with a background in economics, recalculated the cost analysis, they realized the authentic dish was actually more affordable than the fake one. Jasmine explained gently, you save money by being real. That's something worth selling. Lauren smiled. Then that's exactly what we'll do. But just as progress was taking root inside, trouble appeared from outside. One afternoon, a polished man in a navy suit entered the hotel, his badge reading Langford Hospitality. The Langford Hotel was the Imperial Crest's longtime rival downtown. He requested a brief meeting with David Miller, claiming to have insights about cultural programming. During the conversation, he spoke with smooth authority. These cultural performances hotels are staging. It's all surface. A tea ritual here, a painting there. It's marketing, not sustainability. Regulators will see through it soon. His words were polite but sharp. A veiled warning. David stiffened, unsure how to respond. But Sophia, standing at the edge of the meeting, stepped forward calmly. With respect, she said, we don't stage performances. We hire masters, we sign contracts, we pay real wages. Our programs are documented and our staff are trained. If regulators ask, we'll show them not brochures but receipts. The man smiled thinly, adjusting his tie. We'll see, he said before leaving. David exhaled heavily once the door closed. They're watching us, he muttered. Sophia nodded. Good. That means we're doing something worth noticing. By week 4, the numbers began to speak. Sarah presented early data. Tea service revenue was covering its own cost. A digital payment usage had risen to nearly 1/4 of all transactions. Guest satisfaction scores among Mandarin-speaking visitors were trending upward. It's a light step, Sarah said cautiously, but in the right direction. David leaned back in his chair, the first genuine relief he had felt in weeks. Keep going, he said simply. One evening, Sophia walked through the lobby as Daniel adjusted the lighting for the 3rd time. He tilted a small lamp so that teacups under the chandelier no longer glared in guest photos. When the light finally hit just right, Sophia smiled. This, she said softly, is luxury. Not chandeliers. Not marble. But small things that show respect. Daniel grinned, proud of his quiet contribution. For the first time in years, Sophia felt that she wasn't just surviving in her uniform. She was building something lasting, something rooted not in show but in substance. And though rivals whispered and skeptics doubted, she knew the imperial crest was finally learning a new language, the language of people. The rain was falling lightly the morning Sophia, Sarah, and David drove across town to the municipal building. Drops streaked against the car windows like faint pencil lines, blurring the skyline. Today was the first official hearing for the Cultural Exchange Tax Incentive Program, and everything they had been building would either be validated or dismissed as a showpiece. Sophia held a gray folder tightly in her lap. Inside were contracts, receipts, staff rosters, and photos. Weeks of late-night work boiled down to a stack of evidence. Her tea at breakfast had gone cold, untouched. Sarah sat to her left, slim glasses perched on her nose, flipping through last-minute notes. We've got Lily Chen's timesheets. We've got Jasmine's cost analysis. We've got Daniel's adjustments logged. It's all here. We just have to present it clearly. David, sitting to Sophia's right, said nothing. He tapped a pen nervously against his palm, his usually confident posture deflated. This was not a boardroom with investors. It was a government office with officials who would scrutinize every detail. The hearing room was simple. A long table, a stack of files, a microphone for recording. At the head sat Marisol Rivera, the officer overseeing the program. Her short hair framed a face that looked calm but sharp. Next to her, a clerk powered up the recorder. Sophia placed the folder on the table, breathing deeply to steady herself. The door opened again. A man in a polished suit walked in, his badge reading Langford Hospitality. The rival hotel had arrived, requesting to give public comment. David's jaw tightened instantly. The man smiled politely, then spoke with smooth confidence. Lately, many hotels slap cultural labels on basic marketing. A tea ritual in a lobby is no different from a staged performance. There's no proof these efforts are sustainable. His words hung heavy in the room, soft but piercing. David half rose from his chair, ready to defend them, but Sarah touched his arm, signaling him to stay calm. Sophia pressed her palm flat on the folder, grounding herself. When Rivera gestured toward her, Sophia began, not with a lecture but with a story. Last week, she said softly, a guest from Shanghai tried to pay at our reception with WeChat. The system failed. For a moment our staff panicked. But because we had trained for backup, we switched to a static QR code and emailed the receipt later. The guest smiled. He left a note in Chinese in our comment book the next morning, thanking us for making it easy. She flipped to a page in the dossier and slid a copy of that note across the table. If this was just decoration, she continued, it wouldn't be able to carry someone through a moment like that. Then she laid out harder proof. Transaction records showing domestic digital payments had risen to more than 1/4 at pilot points. Camera stills of the private guest path functioning smoothly during peak hours. Lily Chen signed contract and wages as tea master. Jasmine Hall's cost breakdown proving authenticity was also profitable. Each item had a signature, a receipt, or a timestamp. Nothing was staged. We don't hang paintings for photos, Sophia said firmly. We pay a museum to bring real exhibitions. We don't borrow ritual, we hire experts to teach it properly. We don't just put up logos, we ensure the system works even when it fails. The Langford representative smiled thinly. Still, what guarantees sustainability? What stops this from being another fad? Rivera leaned back in her chair, fingers interlaced. Sustainability isn't a promise. It's an operations calendar. Her eyes fixed on Sophia. But I have a sharper question. How do you know this isn't cultural appropriation? Who decides what counts as proper ritual? The room grew still. Sophia didn't flinch. She spoke about partnership. About Lily Chen not as a performer, but as a co-author of the hotel's new language. About stipends paid to staff who used hidden skills beyond their job descriptions. About future plans to invite local artists to tell their own stories inside the hotel. Then Emma Brooks, the housekeeping supervisor now leading rooms and care, stood to speak. She described how her team was no longer told to vanish, but trained to step forward at the right time in the right way. It wasn't decoration. It was daily life. The questioning stretched for nearly 40 minutes. Each time, Sophia returned with evidence, stories backed by receipts, photos backed by signatures. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. Finally, Rivera closed the folder with a decisive snap. "I will recommend approval at the proposed level," she said. "And I expect you to uphold every standard you've described here today." Sophia didn't exhale. She only nodded, thanking her quietly in both English and Spanish. Outside, as they walked back to the car, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp but calmer. David held the door open, still stunned. "You carried that room," he admitted. "Not me." Sophia looked out at the wet pavement, her voice even. "I didn't carry it. The work did. The receipts, the training, the details. Respect doesn't need slogans. It needs proof." David had no answer. For once, silence felt like agreement. Back at the Imperial Crest, the lobby was alive with quiet movement. Lily Chin poured tea for a pair of elderly guests. Daniel adjusted a bulb that had drifted slightly off angle. Ahmed from security guided a family with gentle gestures through the private path. Sophia lingered at the edge watching. Everything flowed like a rehearsed performance. And for the first time she felt both relief and unease. Relief that her system could run without her hand on every lever, and unease because she knew it meant her role had to change again. Leadership wasn't about being everywhere. It was about creating systems strong enough to outlast you. And that realization was both liberating and terrifying. The hearing had ended with approval, but Sophia knew it was only the beginning. A contract on paper meant little if the culture inside the Imperial Crest didn't change. She had seen too many companies install new programs, bask in short-term success, and then slip back into old habits once the spotlight dimmed. To make the changes permanent, she needed to reach deeper. That's when the idea of the Hidden Talent Program took shape. On a Monday morning, a simple email went out to the entire hotel staff. It wasn't mandatory. It wasn't flashy. The subject line read, "Our greatest asset is already here." The body of the message was short. "Next week, we will host a voluntary session for staff who want to share skills, degrees, or languages that are not part of their current job. This is not an evaluation. It's an opportunity to be seen. Transparency and stipends will follow. All are welcome." Sophia pressed send, wondering how many, if any, would show up. That Friday, she stood in a modest conference room that had been hastily repurposed. A whiteboard leaned against the wall. A stack of blank forms sat on the table. She expected perhaps 5 or 6 people. Instead, more than 20 walked in. Daniel Ortiz was the first, folding his maintenance cap neatly in his hands. "I'm finishing my degree in stage lighting design," he explained shyly. "I could redesign the lobby ambience for photos and events." Next was Jasmine Hall from the Hot Kitchen, who admitted she held an economics degree. "I've done cost analysis for my family's restaurant. I can help with menu pricing and profit margins." Lily Parker from reception stepped forward nervously. "I studied East Asian studies. I speak conversational Japanese and Korean. Not fluent, but enough for greetings." Ahmed Khan from security, usually silent, surprised the room. "Before this job, I was a freelance tour guide. I speak fluent Arabic. I could help with Middle Eastern guests." Finally, Emma Brooks walked in last, smiling wryly. "I don't speak a rare language, but I've learned how to listen to my team. Sometimes that's the skill that matters most." Sophia didn't lecture. She didn't hand out forms immediately. Instead, she told a story. She described the boardroom meeting that nearly collapsed. The nonsense translation from the app. The associates pulling out their phones, already preparing to leave. And then a single Mandarin greeting that shifted the entire atmosphere. She described how a cup of tea and a QR code turned what could have been a disaster into a partnership. "If that can happen once," she said, looking around the room, "it can happen again. Not because of me, but because of us." The introductions continued, and as the session ended, Sophia tallied the results. Nearly 40% of staff spoke at least one language beyond English. Almost two-thirds held degrees or certificates and used in their current jobs. More than 70% had special skills, everything from photography to piano repair to first aid, that had never been asked about. She looked at the stack of forms, her chest tightening. All this time, she thought, we've been sitting on a mountain of potential, pretending it didn't exist. Over the next days, small stories began to multiply. Jasmine from the kitchen worked with Lauren to rebalance food costs, discovering that one dish thought to be cheap was actually draining profits. Her calculations saved enough money to fund another month of tea service. Daniel redesigned the lobby lighting, adjusting lamp angles so teacups no longer glared in guest photos. Soon, guests began posting those photos on social media, free marketing the hotel had never planned. Lily Parker taped a small cheat sheet behind the reception desk with 10 polite phrases in Mandarin, tone marks included. Even if you don't speak fluently, she told her colleagues, you can greet someone sincerely. That matters. Ahmed began guiding Middle Eastern guests with quiet confidence, explaining cultural nuances to the staff so they could avoid common mistakes. Bit by bit, the invisible was becoming visible. One evening, as Sophia reviewed the progress board in her office, David walked in. He studied the notes, the lists of staff names, the documented skills. 17 staff with hidden talents identified in 1 month, he said softly. 3 promoted already. 5 receiving stipends. Numbers don't usually move me, but these do. He turned to her, his face more thoughtful than she had ever seen. For years, I believed management meant telling people to stay in their lane. I thought professionalism meant silencing stray voices. But you've shown me something different. Management isn't about muffling. It's about amplifying the right sounds. Sophia met his gaze steadily. That's because the smallest voices can turn the biggest wheels. For once, David didn't argue. He only nodded. Later that night, as Sophia walked through the quiet lobby, she passed Daniel adjusting lights again, Ahmed helping a guest with luggage, and Lily practicing her Mandarin phrases behind the desk. She paused, realizing what had truly changed. The chandelier still sparkled. The marble floor still gleamed. But for the first time, the Imperial Crest wasn't just a place of surface luxury. It was a place where invisible people were finally being seen. And that, Sophia knew, was the foundation of something far greater than chandeliers could ever offer. 2 weeks after the Hidden Talent program began, the Imperial Crest faced its next trial. A European delegation was scheduled to arrive in the morning, followed by a group of Japanese guests later that same afternoon. For Sophia, this wasn't just about showing they could serve Chinese clientele. It was about proving the hotel could adapt, speak multiple cultural languages, and still remain true to its new foundation of respect. At the morning operations meeting, Sophia stood before the staff, her tone calm but clear. We can't lean too far toward one group and forget the others, she said. What we are changing is not the product. It's the way we tell the story to each audience. Every guest, no matter where they come from, should feel that we've thought about them before they even ask. She glanced at Jasmine in the kitchen. Jasmine, I want you to help Lauren trim back the fake flourishes on Western dishes while still keeping the Asian-inspired menu balanced. Europeans know when something isn't authentic. They value simplicity done right. Then she turned to Daniel. Daniel, I need you to test lobby lighting at different hours of the day. Guests love to take photos when they arrive. If there's glare or harsh shadows, it ruins the first impression. Finally, she looked at Lily Parker. We have Japanese guests arriving this week. Draft a list of welcome phrases for the front desk. Even if the staff only says one sentence correctly, it matters. It shows effort. Lily smiled nervously but nodded. I'll have it ready. By midday, the European delegation arrived. They moved through the lobby with ease, admiring the architecture. At reception, Ahmed from security stepped forward to discreetly guide an elderly guest through the private pathway to avoid the crowd. No one asked him to. He simply did it, and the guest smiled gratefully. In the restaurant, Lauren presented authentic dishes without over-decoration. Jasmine stood by quietly, proud that her cost analysis had kept the menu profitable. Sophia observed from the side. For the first time she didn't need to intervene. The staff were carrying the new system themselves, like musicians playing without the conductor's baton. Later that afternoon the Japanese guests began to arrive. At the front desk, Lily Parker's cheat sheet of phrases was taped behind the counter. The staff greeted each guest in Japanese, tones imperfect but sincerity clear. Some guests laughed softly at the effort, responding warmly. One guest paused, visibly touched, and bowed slightly. In that moment Sophia knew, it wasn't about perfect language. It was about respect delivered through small gestures. That evening Sophia gathered the core team in a side room to debrief. Ben Carter, the salesman once skeptical of everything, leaned back in his chair. "I'll admit it," he said. "I thought this whole cultural program would alienate American and European guests. But today I sold a package not because of our suites, but because of our story, about being a hotel that actually pays attention. Turns out respect isn't regional. It sells everywhere." Lauren added, "The food tasted better without the fake decorations. It was simpler but it felt honest. Sometimes less is more." Daniel reported his lighting adjustments, showing photos of the lobby from different hours. "Now the chandelier light doesn't blow out the background. Guests' photos look good on social media. That's free advertising." Lily Parker shyly admitted, "The Japanese phrases worked. Guests laughed but they appreciated it. I think they felt seen." Sophia listened, a quiet pride growing inside her. This wasn't just her project anymore. It belonged to everyone. Later that night, Emma Brooks caught up with Sophia in the hallway. "I used to think management meant hiding the messy parts," Emma said quietly. "Like muffling every stray sound so only the polished parts showed. But today I realized it's the opposite. Management is amplifying the right voices, even if they're imperfect." Sophia smiled. "Exactly. And the smallest voice can sometimes turn the wheel." The next morning, Nina Patel from HR approached Sophia with a thick stack of sign-up forms. "We'll need clear advancement paths and stipends for this program," she said. "Otherwise these voices will fade again. If people risk being visible, they need to know it leads somewhere." Sophia nodded firmly. "Transparency, not promises. We'll announce advancement paths next week." Nina raised an eyebrow. "You realize this is bigger than a program now, don't you?" Sophia glanced toward the lobby where Lily was greeting guests, Daniel was adjusting lights, and Ahmed was quietly directing traffic. "Yes," she said softly. "This isn't a project anymore. It's a culture." That afternoon Sophia received an email from Professor Li Wei, the same relative Charles Liang had mentioned weeks earlier. The message was short but powerful. "Congratulations. The Wellington case will be presented at the fall conference. Consider this your invitation to speak." Sophia leaned back in her chair, stunned. Recognition was coming not just from clients and regulators, but from academia, the very world that had once closed its doors to her. But instead of celebrating, she closed her laptop gently. "Not yet," she whispered to herself. "The work isn't finished." Because she knew the real test wasn't recognition. The real test was endurance. Would the Imperial Crest keep speaking this new language of respect when the excitement wore off? That was the challenge Act 3 would bring. By the time the Imperial Crest reached day 75 of Sophia's roadmap, the building was no longer just a hotel, it was a living system. Tea was poured daily, transactions flowed through digital systems with ease, staff greeted guests in multiple languages, and hidden talents were now part of official schedules. But Sophia knew all of this was still fragile. A culture that wasn't tested could easily collapse. And the real test was looming on the horizon, the 90-day milestone review. At the weekly strategy meeting, David Miller spoke more cautiously than usual. "We've gained ground," he admitted, "but our rivals haven't given up. The Langford Hotel is hosting an international expo next month. They're marketing it as the true global hospitality experience. They're clearly taking aim at us." Ben Carter frowned. "They've already poached 2 of our mid-tier clients. If we stumble at the 90-day review, we risk losing more." Sophia folded her notes calmly. "Then we don't stumble. We show proof, financial, cultural, and human. Sarah Coleman, the finance officer, tapped her pen on the table. Proof I can deliver. Revenue has stabilized. Digital transactions are growing. Guest satisfaction scores have spiked. But we'll need a presentation that ties it all together. Sophia nodded. Not just numbers. Stories backed by numbers. That's how we convince them. Behind the scenes, Emma Brooks worked with her rooms and care team to prepare suites for long-term family bookings. She ordered softer lighting, added foldable screens for privacy, and ensured that small details like slippers and herbal teas were replenished daily. It's not luxury if it's just decoration, she told her staff. Luxury is when a guest feels at home without asking. Meanwhile, Jasmine Hall continued refining cost analysis with Lauren and Gwyn. Together, they introduced a new seasonal menu that balanced European and Asian influences without insulting either. Lauren explained to the chefs, "We're not chasing authenticity like a checklist. We're chasing respect. That's what guests taste." In security, Ahmed Khan proposed a subtle innovation: bilingual safety cards in rooms. "No one notices until they need them," he said. "But when they do, it could mean everything." Sophia approved the idea instantly. But just as the momentum seemed steady, a message arrived that shifted the tone entirely. David called Sophia into his office, holding a folded letter. His voice was low, tense. "Victor Liang is returning. He's booked a suite here next month." Sophia froze. She had never met Victor personally, but she had heard the stories. The youngest of the Liang brothers, Victor was known for being both ruthless and charismatic. He had run hotels across Asia, and unlike Charles, he didn't hide behind corporate walls. He was hands-on, sharp, and unforgiving. David's jaw tightened. "He'll be coming to see whether we've transformed or whether this is still the same place he nearly abandoned." Sophia felt her pulse quicken, but her voice stayed calm. "Then we prepare as if he's the regulator, the guest, and the critic all in one. If we can survive him, we can survive anyone." The weeks that followed were the busiest the staff had ever known. Daniel Ortiz adjusted lobby lighting schedules to align with international time zones, making sure the first impression at sunrise for Japanese guests was as flawless as the evening glow for Europeans. Lily Parker trained reception staff in basic greetings for yet another language, this time Arabic, so that Ahmed wouldn't carry the burden alone. Emma rotated her team, ensuring that no single housekeeper felt invisible. She even began mentoring a young employee named Rosa, who dreamed of studying hospitality management. "Don't hide your voice," Emma told her. "If you have ideas, speak them." Sophia herself spent nights rehearsing the 90-day presentation with Sarah and Ben. They crafted a narrative: the problem, the failure, the shift, the proof. Every chart was tied to a real story. Every story was tied to receipts. On day 89, the lobby buzzed with quiet tension. Guests flowed in and out, unaware of the weight pressing on the staff. David pulled Sophia aside. His voice was rough but sincere. "You've done more in 90 days than some managers do in 10 years. Whatever happens tomorrow, you should know I see it." Sophia didn't smile. She simply answered, "Tomorrow isn't about me. It's about all of us." That night, as she walked through the nearly empty lobby, Sophia paused under the chandelier. The light glittered, but she didn't stare at the crystals. She looked instead at the tea table, the QR code on the wall, the bilingual safety cards, the soft lamp Daniel had angled perfectly. None of it was decoration anymore. It was proof. And tomorrow she would need every piece of it. Because Victor Liang's arrival was more than a visit. It was Judgment Day. The morning Victor Liang arrived, the imperial crest felt like it was holding its breath. Staff moved with precision, every step measured, every word rehearsed. Yet beneath the polished surface was a quiet anxiety that even Sophia could feel in her bones. She stood near the entrance, not to greet Victor directly but to observe. This was not her stage, it was the hotel's. The true test wasn't whether she could manage every detail herself. It was whether the system she had built could perform under fire. At exactly 9 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled into the drive. Out stepped Victor Liang. Tall, lean, and sharply dressed, he radiated control. His gaze swept over the lobby in one calculating glance, as if every lamp, every chair, every face was data to be assessed. David Miller moved forward, hand extended, but Victor ignored it, walking straight past. "I don't shake hands until I've seen the work," he said flatly. Victor's inspection began immediately. He stopped at reception, speaking Mandarin to test the staff. Lily Parker bowed slightly and responded with a polite greeting, tones careful though not perfect. Victor gave no reaction, but his eyes flicked to the cheat sheet taped discreetly behind the counter. He noticed everything. Next he approached the tea table. Lily Chin, calm as always, poured with practiced grace. The tea was authentic, not a performance, each motion precise but unhurried. Victor lifted the cup, sipped once and set it down without a word. In the restaurant, Lauren Nguyen presented the seasonal menu. Victor scanned it, unimpressed at first, until Jasmine Hall quietly handed him a cost analysis sheet that matched every dish. Authenticity backed by profit margins. Victor raised one eyebrow but said nothing. On the guest floors, Emma Brooks guided him through suites prepared for long-term stays. The details were subtle: soft lighting, privacy screens, slippers placed with care. Victor ran a finger along the surface of a table, checking for dust. None. Finally, Ahmed Khan approached with a bilingual safety card, offering it in Arabic and English. Victor studied it, then slipped it into his jacket pocket without comment. When the tour ended, Victor summoned them all to the small conference room. His silence up to this point had been heavier than words. Now, sitting at the head of the table, he finally spoke. "For years," he began, his voice low but sharp, "this hotel was a failure. It wore luxury like a costume, polished marble, chandeliers, empty rituals. I nearly sold it." He paused, scanning the faces of Sophia, David, and the team. "Today I see something different. But I am not convinced yet." Sophia leaned forward, steady. "What would convince you?" Victor's gaze locked onto hers. "Proof that this isn't performance. Proof that when the spotlight fades, the system holds." That was Sophia's cue. She opened the thick binder Sarah had prepared and began presenting. Not flashy slides. Not marketing phrases. Just evidence. Financial reports showing steady revenue growth and cost savings from authentic practices. A guest satisfaction scores broken down by nationality, proving improvements across groups. Photos and receipts documenting every cultural partnership, every staff stipend, every training session. A list of 17 staff whose hidden talents had been formally integrated into operations. Each point was tied to a story: Daniel's lighting, Lily's greetings, Jasmine's cost analysis, Emma's mentoring. "This hotel isn't a stage," Sophia concluded firmly. "It's a system. A living one. And it doesn't depend on me. It depends on them." She gestured to the staff seated around the table. Victor was silent for a long time. The room felt frozen. Then he rose, pacing slowly. Finally he turned to David. "You hired her out of desperation," Victor said bluntly. "That much is obvious. But desperation forced innovation. And innovation, when grounded in proof, becomes strength." He turned to Sophia. "You've done in 90 days what management failed to do in 10 years. I don't give compliments lightly. So hear me clearly, you've earned this hotel a second chance." The team exhaled, relief flooding the room. David closed his eyes briefly, shoulders dropping. But Victor wasn't finished. "This isn't the end. If you stop here, you'll collapse. Culture is not built in 90 days, it is tested over years. I will return. And when I do, I expect progress, not maintenance." His words were both approval and challenge, as sharp as they were motivating. When Victor finally left the building, staff gathered in the lobby, the tension breaking like a storm cloud passing. Emma laughed quietly, a sound of sheer relief. Jasmine clutched her cost sheets as if they were a shield that had just saved them. David turned to Sophia, his voice husky. "He gave you no applause, but make no mistake, today was a victory." Sophia didn't smile. She looked around at the staff, at the guests, at the quiet hum of the hotel now alive with new rhythm. "This wasn't my victory," she said softly. "It was theirs. It was proof that invisible people, when seen, can rebuild a place from the inside out." She paused under the chandelier once more, remembering the way Victor's eyes had scanned every detail. Yes, he would be back. And when he returned, she intended to show him not just survival but transformation. The morning after Victor's inspection, the imperial crest buzzed with quiet triumph. Though Victor's approval had been measured, his words carried weight. For years, staff had felt invisible, unseen by the very people who profited from their labor. But now they had proof. The system they had built together was strong enough to withstand scrutiny from one of the sharpest critics in the industry. Sophia knew, however, that relief was dangerous. Relief tempted people to relax, to slip back into old habits. And the one thing she feared most was regression. If the hotel didn't keep moving forward, all their progress would eventually crumble. So she called a meeting with her core team: David, Sarah, Ben, Emma, Jasmine, Daniel, Ahmed, and Lily. Around the long table, they looked tired but energized, like soldiers after battle. "We survived 90 days, Sophia began. But Victor was right. Culture isn't built in 90 days. It's built in years. Which means we're not done, we're just getting started." David raised an eyebrow. "And what does just getting started look like?" Sophia took a breath. "It means expansion. We take what we've built here and deepen it. Partnerships. Long-term programs. Staff development pathways that make this more than a pilot project." Sarah leaned forward. "I can structure advancement tiers tied to stipends. But we'll need transparency in promotions, otherwise resentment will creep in." Emma nodded. "I'll oversee training for rooms and care. If we're expanding, the team needs consistent standards. No more guesswork." Jasmine added, "We can design cross-department rotations. If staff understand the whole hotel, they'll innovate better." The room filled with quiet excitement. Expansion wasn't just survival, it was growth. That week, Sophia began reaching out to local cultural organizations. She met with the director of a nearby art museum, proposing a rotating exhibition in the hotel lobby. "Guests crave authenticity," she explained. "Let's bring it directly to them. And we'll pay artists fairly, not exploit them." She also contacted language schools, offering part-time contracts for instructors to train hotel staff in conversational skills. "We don't need fluency," she told one skeptical teacher. "We need sincerity. Just enough to show guests that we cared enough to try." At first, some organizations hesitated. Hotels had a reputation for using culture as decoration without true respect. But when Sophia shared the hotel's receipts, stipends, and staff advancement program, the tone shifted. This wasn't exploitation. It was partnership. By the end of the month, the Imperial Crest had 3 new contracts. A museum rotating local art in the lobby. A language school teaching staff weekly basics in Japanese, Arabic, and French. A cultural center providing training on etiquette for international guests. The building itself began to feel less like a polished facade and more like a crossroads of genuine exchange. Inside the hotel, the hidden talent program flourished. Daniel Ortiz now oversaw lighting not just for the lobby but for all public areas. His designs gave the hotel a new identity, one that photographed beautifully on social media. Guests tagged the hotel daily, providing free advertising. Jasmine's economic analysis saved enough money to fund the language program without touching the hotel's emergency budget. For the first time, finance wasn't just about cutting costs, it was about reinvesting savings into people. Ahmed introduced a cultural sensitivity briefing for security staff, explaining how small gestures, like eye contact or tone, could change an entire guest's experience. His leadership earned him recognition as more than just a guard. He became an educator. And Lily Parker, once shy at the reception desk, was now leading short language sessions for her peers. She created laminated cards with common greetings in multiple languages, simple enough for anyone to use confidently. Even Emma, who had been skeptical of change at the start, now trained her team to view themselves not as cleaners but as hosts. She reminded them, respect is not about standing in the background. It's about stepping forward when needed. One evening, Sophia walked the floors quietly, observing. She saw Daniel adjusting light angles while explaining color warmth to a young intern. She heard Lily practicing Japanese phrases with another receptionist, their voices soft but earnest. She noticed Emma guiding Rosa, the new trainee, showing her how to set a room with both efficiency and grace. The hotel was no longer running on fear of failure. It was running on pride. David joined her near the lobby, watching the flow. "I'll admit," he said, his voice softer than usual, "when Victor said culture is built in years, I thought he meant it as a warning. But seeing this now, I think we've started something that might outlive all of us." Sophia looked around, the chandelier's glow reflecting in her eyes. "That's the point. A system that doesn't depend on one person is a system that lasts." The following week, Sophia received a call from Professor Li Wei, confirming her invitation to speak at the Fall Hospitality Conference. "Your case has drawn attention," he said. "But they don't want just numbers. They want the story. They want to know how a failing hotel transformed through staff who were once invisible." Sophia hesitated. For years, academia had been a world that excluded her. Now it was inviting her back in, not as a student but as a voice. "I'll be there," she said finally. As she hung up, she realized this wasn't just about the imperial crest anymore. It was about a movement, showing that respect, transparency, and hidden talent could transform not just one hotel, but an entire industry. And that realization filled her not with fear, but with determination. Because now the world was watching. The fall conference was held in a vast auditorium in Boston, attended by leaders from across the hospitality industry. For years, Sophia had walked past halls like this, excluded from the stage, her voice dismissed before it was even heard. But this time her name was on the program. Not as a case study participant. Not as a consultant's assistant. As the keynote speaker. Still, she didn't stride onto the stage with arrogance. She stepped carefully the way she always did, rooted, steady, prepared. She had rehearsed her speech dozens of times with Sarah and Ben, trimming away fluff, leaving only what mattered, the truth. Professor Li Wei introduced her with measured respect. In 90 days, this woman led a failing hotel from collapse to renewal. Not through gimmicks but through dignity. Please welcome Sophia Reed. The applause was polite at first, cautious. Many in the audience still doubted. But as Sophia began to speak, the room shifted. She didn't start with numbers. She started with a story. She told them about the day the Chinese delegation nearly walked out because of a broken translation app. About how a cup of tea, poured with sincerity, turned the moment around. About a QR code taped to the wall by a young receptionist who simply refused to let guests feel invisible. She told them about the Hidden Talent Program, how maintenance workers, receptionists, and cleaners revealed degrees, languages, and skills no one had ever asked about. How cost savings funded stipends. How small voices changed entire systems. And then she gave them proof. Charts showing stabilized revenue. Tables showing improved guest satisfaction scores. Receipts proving every stipend, every cultural contract, every reinvestment in staff. "This isn't about marble floors or chandeliers," she said firmly. "It's about respect. Real respect. When you treat staff as invisible, your luxury is a mask. When you let them be seen, your luxury becomes alive." The room was silent, hanging on her words. During the Q&A, an older executive stood up. "Ms. Reed," he said skeptically, "isn't this just a temporary experiment? Staff enthusiasm fades. Cultural programs collapse. What makes you believe your model will last?" Sophia looked at him steadily. "Because it doesn't depend on me. I could leave tomorrow and the system would remain." "What?" "Because it belongs to them now. The staff own it. Culture isn't decoration, it's endurance. And endurance doesn't fade when the spotlight does." For the first time, applause erupted before the session even ended. Back at the Imperial Crest, the staff gathered in the lobby to watch the live stream. They saw Sophia on stage, calm and commanding, telling their story. Daniel grinned at seeing his lighting designs mentioned. Lily blushed when her name was spoken aloud in front of the entire industry. Jasmine wiped her eyes quietly as her cost analysis appeared on screen. For once, invisible people saw themselves reflected not as footnotes, but as history makers. In the weeks that followed, the Imperial Crest received an influx of inquiries. Other hotels wanted to learn how they had turned failure into strength. Journalists wrote features not about the chandelier or the suites, but about the staff. Victor Liang himself sent a short message. You passed the test. Don't stop now. David called Sophia into his office, his tone softer than she had ever heard. You've not only saved this hotel, he said. You've redefined it. And you've redefined me. I thought management meant control. You've shown me it means listening, amplifying, trusting. Sophia only nodded. That's all I ever wanted, for voices to be heard. Months later, on a quiet evening, Sophia stood once again beneath the chandelier. The lobby was calm, guests moving with ease, staff flowing like a practiced orchestra. She looked not at the glitter above her but at the small things. The tea table, the safety cards, the language cheat sheets, the art on the walls. This wasn't the same hotel she had entered months ago, facing whispers to be fired before she had even begun. This was something else now. A place rebuilt not by chandeliers or marble, but by dignity, respect, and persistence. Emma approached, arms folded but smiling. Funny thing, she said. I used to think being invisible was just the way it had to be. Now, I can't remember what that felt like. Sophia smiled softly. That's because you're not invisible anymore. None of you are. As she walked toward the exit, Sophia felt no need for applause or awards. The real reward was already here, alive in every corner of the imperial crest. A hotel once drowning in pretense now stood as proof. When hidden people are finally seen, they don't just change a workplace. They change everything. And for Sophia Reed, that was victory enough.